Thanks, Holly, for that introduction. Yeah, and in this webinar, I'll be talking about what steps you can take to keep pace and go beyond your competition's greenhouse gas management planning actions. I'll talk about why it's important to think in those terms, and then some of the practical steps you can take to ensure that you're at least keeping pace and potentially going beyond what they're doing. So first, why is this important? So a good plan that differentiates you from your competitors, this will help satisfy demands from your customers and from other stakeholders. So today there's increasing demand from consumers and different stakeholders such as NGOs for companies to take climate change action, and that starts by setting up a greenhouse gas management plan. And setting up this type of plan that positions you well in the marketplace is really a great way to answer those concerns proactively. It also allows you to keep pace directly with your competition's marketing efforts. So depending on the industry you're in and the products that you're selling, your competition may already be making aggressive marketing plans around greenhouse gas management. In my previous webinar about deriving business value from greenhouse gas management plans, we saw examples of this, clients that SCS has worked with, such as CTC Global, which has certified its products CO2 reduction, and New Leaf Guayaquil, who has spoken publicly about the greenhouse gas planning efforts they've taken, and New Leaf Papers, which has had an ongoing marketing campaign about the greenhouse gas benefits of its products. So certainly this type of greenhouse gas planning can allow you to keep pace with these marketing efforts to stay positioned well against your competition in the marketplace. Investors are also interested in funding climate-friendly products. If you're a company that uses investment at times or perhaps is looking for grant funds for different purposes, climate-friendly products can help you get new types of funds, and there's an increasing push in the places like venture capital funds and elsewhere to give funds to products that have good greenhouse gas benefits, whether it be things like sustainability investment funds, or of course the better known new investment fund launched by Bill Gates, which is specifically focused on clean tech. Clearly there's a lot of interest in this area too, and having a good greenhouse gas management plan and beginning to work in this area could make new funding streams through investment available to your company. So those are just a few reasons why it's important to position yourself against your competitors. Here's some tips on how you can evaluate your competition's greenhouse gas management efforts to figure out where you fit in the market. First and most basic and quickest is to do some basic internet research. So this can include looking at the company websites of your competitors, looking at sustainability reports they may have published. Often companies will have published greenhouse gas inventory reports or even whole greenhouse gas action plans on their website or as part of other marketing materials. And also if you have large competitors, they may be reporting to CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, and depending on their level of reporting, you may be able to find quite a lot of information on their greenhouse gas planning efforts through the CDP data repositories. It's also good to do some legwork. Now, what I mean by this includes going to things like conferences. Very often, this is sort of there's a few conferences. This is the place that different companies talk about the greenhouse gas actions that their companies are taking. So, for example, in the first week of March is the Climate Leadership Conference, a conference that SCS will be participating in. We'll have a booth there. This is a place where leaders in the climate change action space come together to discuss the climate change actions they're taking. So that's a great place to do a survey of what's out there, what different efforts people are taking, and how they're talking about it publicly. Market research, so I use these examples of CTC Global and New Leaf Papers, so just investigating what types of marketing claims your competitors are using, whether that be on the internet or in other types of venues. Or simply making phone calls to ask some of your trusted colleagues about what they're sort of thinking in terms of climate action, what steps they're taking, what steps they may not be taking. A lot of the time this can be quite valuable. You can get more information in a 10-minute phone call than you can in 2 days of internet research. So it definitely is worthwhile to just reach out to your network and see what issues, challenges, and opportunities people are seeing in this space, and then what actions their companies are taking. Now, steps to plan your own greenhouse gas management at your company. In my previous webinars, I've talked about some of the practical details of evaluating the inventory, setting targets, crafting policies, going carbon neutral, and reporting. Here, I'll talk more about how to plan your greenhouse gas management activities in such a way that they position you well against your competition in the marketplace, given the market survey you'll already have completed. So first, you want to determine where your company's greenhouse gas action plan will fit in with your competition. And this really depends on the branding and leadership or not position that your company takes. So is your company a thought leader? Is it a company that prefers to stay in the middle of the pack on these types of initiatives, or does it prefer to be a follower? Each of these different positions have their own pros and cons, and this very much may depend on broader branding questions that you may need to carefully sync up with across the company to ensure that you're not positioning yourself differently from the company's overall positioning efforts. And this may require some trial and error to figure out whether initially you had interest in pushing it to a thought leadership position, but then you get some pushback from higher on that your company, getting feedback that your company might be in the middle of the pack. So this can take some iterations and feedback from different people within your company to figure out where you best fit in and where your company should fit in terms of the spectrum of potential climate change action you can take. Once you've figured out at the highest level about the type of positioning your company wants to pursue, you can then do a survey of where you are today. So this just includes figuring out what steps you've already taken in your greenhouse gas planning, point by point. If you have a plan set up, which parts of the plan have you already completed and executed? Once you've done this and figured out where you are on a line-by-line basis, it may then be useful to complete a line-by-line comparison with your key competitors. So this could include something as simple as a simple table matrix talking about different components of your plan and different components of your competitors' plans, so you can properly evaluate where they fit in and where you fit in with them, and if it's lining up with your company's overall strategic goals in terms of greenhouse gas planning. And really the key question you want to answer from this survey is what you're doing satisfy your company's goals for positioning in the marketplace? Now some quick tips on how to take your greenhouse gas management steps to the next level. So if you are a company that's interested in pursuing thought leadership, or if you want to push yourself out of being in the middle of the pack to a more prominent leadership type of position, there's a few approaches you can use to sort of take this greenhouse gas management action to the next level. So some of the common tactics. You could pursue carbon neutrality. So this involves the evaluation of the greenhouse gas inventory and then purchasing carbon offsets sufficient to offset your entire corporate inventory. And some companies are now even pursuing, and we see this more and more commonly, product carbon neutrality types of claims where they complete life cycle assessments across the full supply chain to evaluate the footprint for the product from cradle to grave, and then purchasing enough carbon offsets to go neutral across the entire life cycle. Evaluation of short-lived climate pollutant emissions. This is another interesting and cutting-edge topic. Companies are today beginning to evaluate their footprint on things like black carbon and tropospheric ozone, which have traditionally been left out of greenhouse gas inventories. So just recently, the UNEP CTAC has published a list of global warming potential factors. The IPCC has long published a set of factors for the past over 5 years. And there's been a wealth of information in the climate science literature in order to do this. And this is something that SES has done with many different companies. It's a great way to differentiate your company by beginning to explore these types of emissions, and gives you a whole host of talking points that lend themselves to a thought leadership position. Working with suppliers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this can involve interacting closely with your suppliers to understand where their biggest categories of greenhouse gas emissions are, and then understanding what ways you could support them to reduce those emissions, and where you might derive different funding streams in order to find ways to take those proactive steps. Finally, another one that we see sometimes out there is something that's sometimes called insetting. So this essentially involves supply chain investments, or not just in the supply chain, I should say, in company operations in mitigation projects. So this is something like offsetting, but instead companies take the onus on themselves. So we recently worked with a company which essentially managed actively and supported the active management of forest plots in South America. Now this actually resulted in a net carbon storage for the company on those sites, and because it was under the direct company's management, they were able to include it directly in their greenhouse gas inventory, reflecting it as a carbon negative storage that actually was sufficient to almost neutralize across their entire supply chain of operations. So this is sort of a different flavor than offsetting, where funds are used for other actors to take steps to reduce greenhouse gases, and it's a very creative way to get to essentially the same effect and be able to make certain types of carbon neutral claims. Now, just in conclusion, some tips on how you can ensure your greenhouse gas management activities meet your positioning goals. First, as I've talked about, is you need to understand your competition. So this involves a detailed survey of what your competition is doing, including steps such as internet research, and then also legwork involving reaching out and speaking with people out in the marketplace to understand what they're doing. You then want to understand yourself, and by this I mean understand where your own company wants to fit in, what resources it has available to bear, what resources it may need to add in order to meet its positioning goals. Once you've set up those high-level goals at a good level, you can then plan for where you want to fit into this whole process. And we recommend doing this planning carefully. It all begins with a good greenhouse gas inventory. From there you can begin to set credible reduction targets, craft policies, go carbon neutral potentially, and take the other steps that you want to in order to ensure that you're properly positioned in the market. If you take these steps effectively, you'll really ensure that you optimize the business value you can derive from this greenhouse gas plan and really get the most you can out of the steps you're taking from a business perspective. So if you need help in managing your company's greenhouse gas emissions, including any of these pieces I've talked about, such as competition surveys, internal survey of your own efforts, or any of these other factors, these are all things that SCS can help with. So you can work with us to do some of the more technical aspects, such as greenhouse gas inventory, target setting, policy development, and carbon neutrality. You can also leverage us as a marketing partner, another advisor, simply on the way you want to position yourself in the market here today. So with that, we can shift to some Q&A.
Thanks, Tobias. So feel free to type in your questions in the chat window, and we will respond to them. We've had a few questions come in. The first question, where can I find information on my competitor's website?
Yeah, so this is the common type of research that we do for various reasons. And companies will house their greenhouse gas plans and sustainability reports and that sort of thing in different places, so there's not really a one-size-fits-all. It kind of depends on their website structure and how it's all built out. But commonly we find if you poke through companies' About Us pages, they can tell you a lot about, or these can lead you to the different types of reports that might include information on greenhouse gas planning. For large companies, pages that speak about information for investors can actually tell you quite a lot, because often companies report a lot of depth to investors for various reasons about greenhouse gas actions they're taking. You can even just do things like a Google search for sustainability report for whatever the company may be, or a greenhouse gas inventory for that company, and often without even going first to their website, a simple Google search can tell you without any more effort than that.
Great, thank you, Tobias. The next question we have, what common trends are there in GHG management that I should be aware of?
Yeah, so this varies industry by industry. What's kind of the common actions that are taken, and it can depend on particulars about what types of operations we're talking about, differences in supply chain across different industries, and et cetera. Some commonalities across a lot of industries is that there's increasing interest in setting more and more aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets. So things such as the Science-Based Target Setting Initiative has gotten a lot of traction for, particularly for larger companies. There's also more and more focus on evaluating supply chain greenhouse gas inventories, so that includes the Scope 3 purchased goods and services greenhouse gas inventory. And not only evaluating that part of the greenhouse gas inventory, but also finding steps on how to engage throughout the supply chain to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across that full Scope 3 inventory, because that can clearly be quite challenging, and companies are beginning to learn how and explore how they can work closely with their supply chain to take those steps. Now we see these as real commonalities, this aggressive target setting and engaging with the supply chain, because they're a good way to get a lot of marketable talking points that companies can use kind of broadly about the greenhouse gas action steps that they are taking.
Great, thanks, Tobias. Another question we have, what conferences should I go to learn more about GHG stuff my competitors are doing?
Yeah, so I mentioned a key one that's just coming up, and that's the Climate Leadership Conference. As I said, we always go to that conference. SCS is a company, so this year we'll have a booth. So if you're there, I definitely encourage you to stop by. That's kind of one of the premier conferences for attending to learn about corporate greenhouse gas actions. That's the first week of March in Chicago this year. Another upcoming one, if you're in the natural food product sector, is during the Expo West trade show in Anaheim. That's the second week of March. And I'll be speaking at an event there called Climate Day. That's on March 8th, which will offer a deeper dive into how companies can craft out good greenhouse gas action plans. So if you're a company that's going to Expo, it's definitely worthwhile to make some time for Climate Day. I believe I'm the first speaker up in the morning. That's part of the session that the Sustainable Food Trade Association is managing. I know that's going to be a great event. Paul Hawken is scheduled to speak later on that day, so that'll be quite exciting, so you should stop by if you're at the conference. And other ones later on the year, the CERES conference, CERES, is one that's in San Francisco in April. That's another kind of hub one that we always go to, certainly because we're based in the Bay Area, and that conference is in San Francisco every year. Other ones that come to mind, there's a new one from last year called Companies versus Climate Change. That's a good one. That is in Florida at the end of the year, so a good place to go if you're out east.
Great, thanks, Tobias. And I'll just leave 1 more minute. If anyone has any final questions, go ahead and enter them in the chat window. Okay, looks like we don't have any more questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. And I just wanted to mention that we are offering a free consultation on GHG management plan strategy. So if you're interested in that free consultation, you can contact me. And I'd like to thank you for joining us on this webinar series. And please feel free to contact us with any questions or if you're interested in setting up a free consultation.